I didn't even notice the moment when my days started repeating themselves so much that they stopped feeling separate from each other. At first, I thought it was simply adult life whenever I constantly rushing somewhere, walking and feeling tired. Every morning started the same way. I woke up, reached for my phone, and before breakfast, I was already drowning in other people's thoughts, news, and endless noise. It never even crossed my mind that one day I could get so used to this routine that I would stop nothing sound inside it. I rode the metro and saw dozens of people around me who looked exactly that way I left inside. Sometimes I feel like modern life is an endless streams of information that never stops and never gives you a chance of your life clearly. And somewhere inside all the noise, you slowly stop and distinguish that you actually want for yourself. I got so used to living the autopilot that at some point I stopped asking myself even the simplest questions. Do I even like my life and I'm actually happy at all? Or I simply continue to move forward out of inertia because I'm afraid to stop even for a second. But inside me everything was slowly becoming quiet. Sometimes I woke up already tired, even then nothing bad was happening in my life. It was a physical exhaustion, but the feeling that I have been living the wrong life for too long. It felt life itself slowly turning into the endless to-do list that never trust ends. Reply to messages, finish words, don't forget something important, and then make up in the morning and stop everything again. And maybe the scary things about routine is not exhaustion itself, but how quietly it makes you feel empty inside. You stop dreaming about anything because you slowly begin thinking only about surviving another week. And at some point you realize that you haven't truly been alone this yourself, in complete silence for a very long time. After that evening, for the first time in a long while, I stayed alone in silence, without music, videos, or endless noise around me. At first it felt very uncomfortable, as if I suddenly found myself alone this without I have been avoiding for too long. I sat in my room and realized that I couldn't really remember the last time I truly stopped and simply listened to myself. At some point I started noticing how tired I was living in constant rush. It felt like if I stopped even for a second I would immediately fall behind everyone else. But the faster I tried moving forward, the more I lost the feeling of why I was doing any of this at all. The real problem was I had been living for too long is feel real life would begin later. I started going outside more often without any specific reason, just to feel that the world around me still existed. Sometimes I simply walk through the streets and watch people talking, laughing, and living their ordinary lives. I sat on the grass, and for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't thinking about work, messages, or tasks I needed to finish. I simply watched the sunset, listened to the sound of trees, and tried to understand why such simple moments suddenly felt unusual. Maybe I had been living in survive mode for too long, completely stopped noticing life itself. The thought that one day I could be wake up and realize I have lived someone else's life always scared me. A life I never truly chose, but simply accepted because it felt easier and more familiar. And the longer I thought about it, the more I started remembering my younger self. When we are children, we almost always know exactly what makes us happy. We don't need to explain to ourselves why we want to walk around, dream, create something, or simply look at the sky. One evening I was walking in the rain and suddenly realized that nothing truly terrible was happening, but the world around me continued living regardless of my fears. People continued laughing inside cafes, street lights continued turning on the streets, trains continued moving somewhere forward, and the little blue planet keeps spinning somewhere in the middle of darkness. And in the moment, for the first time in a very long while, I felt a strange sense of calm inside myself. I realized that life had not disappeared. I had simply been looking in the wrong direction for too long. The more time I spent alone with myself, the harder it became to pretend that I was satisfied with my life. I have spent too much time trying to become the person other people expected me to be. And at some point I became so used to adapting to other people's expectations that I stopped understanding that I actually wanted myself. Maybe the scared feeling is realize that you are slowly starting to live someone else's life. A life that you keep doing all the right things but still feel empty inside. You keep moving forward only because you're afraid to stop to and honestly look at yourself. That was the moment that I started remembering my younger self. The child who never thought about productivity, deadlines, or that other people would think about him. They simply live because we are curious to experience the world around us. And one day you suddenly realize that inside of building your own life, you started building a safe cage of yourself. Maybe that was the first moment when I became truly afraid, but I wasn't afraid of the future or uncertainty. I became afraid that I could spend my entire life without ever truly feeling alive. I realized that I no longer wanted to postpone life, as even one day a perfect moment would magically appear of me to finally start living for myself. Because the perfect moment does not exist. Life is happening right now, while we continue being afraid to take the first steps. And maybe for the first time in a very long while, I honestly admitted to one simple thing to myself. I have known for a long time what I truly want. I was simply too afraid to fail, afraid of looking stupid. But the longer I lived inside that fear, the more I felt myself slowly disappearing. And that was the moment when something inside me changed. The world did not become easier. My problems did not disappear. But for the first time in a very long while, I felt a strange sense of peace become. I finally stopped running away from myself. After all of this, I did not become a different person overnight. My life did not turn into a perfect story when everything suddenly became clear and easy. I still feel anxious about the future, sometimes get tired and doubt myself. But inside me something appeared that had been missing for a very long time. A quiet feeling that I had finally started feeling my own life again. Before I thought happiness was some huge goal that could only be reached through constant study and endless productivity. But now I'm starting to understand that maybe happiness is made of completely different things. From silence in the evening, from walking without a destination, from warm lights inside apartment windows. From conversation with new people, from finally noticing the wind after rushing thought life for too long. I started to realize that life had never disappeared. It had been continuing around me entire time. I had simply spent too much time looking only at screen deadlines and my own fears. And maybe for the first time in a very long while, I stopped treating work as the center of my existence. Work can be an important part of life, but it should never completely replace life itself. Sometimes I feel like many people live while constantly waiting for some perfect moment that will finally allow them to become themselves. But the truth is that such moment will probably never come. Nobody will, and as long as that continues, we still have time to truly feel life. Nobody will come and tell you that now is finally safe to stop being afraid and stop living that way you truly want to live. That is why one day you have to make that decision yourself. Maybe growing up is not a moment when you become more serious or more successful. Maybe growing up is the moment when you finally admit to yourself what you truly want, even if it feels scary, even if you are sure about the outcome, even if there are no guarantees ahead of you. Right now, I still don't know what my future will look like, but for the first time in a long while, that no longer scared me as much, because I finally stopped living as if my real life was supposed to be someday later. I started understanding that life is happening right now inside this small moment that once felt too ordinary and invisible to notice. And maybe that is the real meaning of all this. Not waiting for a perfect life, but learning to notice the one as already happening around you. The little blue planet is still spinning somewhere in the middle of darkness,